Central Park. All floor-to-ceiling windows and crystal chandeliers. My family occupied the table like visiting royalty, which in their minds they were. "Sarah, darling, try the lobster," Mom said, gesturing with a wine glass that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "It's divine." I picked at my salad and watched my brother Julian hold court at the head of the table, regaling our cousins with stories about his latest business venture. Something about cryptocurrency and NFTs that he clearly didn't understand but spoke about with absolute confidence. "The initial investment is only $2.3 million, Julian was saying. "Projected returns of 400% within 18 months. Our Uncle Richard whistled. "That's ambitious." "That's Julian," Dad said proudly. "Always thinking big. Takes after me." Julian was 35. He'd been thinking big since college, when Dad gave him $500,000 to start his first company. It had collapsed within a year. Then came the restaurant chain, $800,000 gone. The tech startup, $1.2 million evaporated. The real estate development scheme, $2.1 million disappeared. Every failure was someone else's fault. The market, the timing, bad partners. Never Julian's vision. Never his execution. And after each spectacular failure, he'd dust himself off and start planning the next big thing. "With my money." "Sarah," Dad said, turning his attention to me, "we need to discuss Julian's opportunity. Here it comes. He needs $2.3 million by Friday. I know you have it in your investment account. It's just sitting there earning what for percent? This could quadruple in value." I was 29 years old. I'd been funding Julian's opportunities since I was 22. Fresh out of MIT with a degree in computer science and a job offer from a defense contractor that paid $120,000 a year. Back then, Julian had needed just $50,000 to launch his first venture. I'd given it to him because family helped family. Because Dad said Julian was going to be the next Steve Jobs. Because Mom cried and said I was breaking her heart by not believing in my brother. That $50,000 became $100,000. Then $300,000. Then 7 figures. Over 7 years, I'd loaned Julian $8.4 million. He'd paid back exactly $0. "Sarah," Dad prompted. "Are you listening?" "I'm listening," I said quietly. "You want $2.3 million by Friday." "Not want," Dad corrected. "Need. This is time sensitive. The investment window closes." "They always do," I murmured. "What was that?" "Nothing. Continue." Julian leaned forward, his Rolex catching the light. "Sarah, I know you're skeptical. You've always been the cautious one. But this is different. I've got inside information. Connections. This is the opportunity that's going to make us all wealthy." We were already wealthy. Or rather, I was wealthy. What my family didn't know, what I'd carefully hidden for 3 years, was that while I'd been writing checks for Julian's failures, I'd also been building something real. I'd started consulting on the side. Small projects at first, then larger ones. I'd invested in a startup that went public. I'd developed proprietary software and licensed it. I'd made strategic investments in emerging markets. My current net worth was $47 million. My family thought I made maybe $150,000 a year and had been draining my savings to fund Julian's dreams. They thought I was the responsible, boring sister who worked a normal job and lived a normal life. They had no idea. "So," Julian pressed, "are you in?" "Let me think about it," I said. Dad's face darkened. "Think about it? Sir, this is your brother. Family doesn't think about it. Family acts." I said, "I'll think about it." "You always do this," Julian said, his voice taking on that petulant edge. "You make me beg. You hold your money over my head like some kind of power trip. I'm trying to build an empire here and you're nickeling and diming me." Nickeling and diming. I'd given him $8.4 million. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "Sarah, honey, please. Julian really needs this. His last venture didn't work out and he's been so depressed. This could turn everything around for him." His last venture. The one I'd funded with $2.1 million 18 months ago. The luxury car rental service that collapsed when Julian spent the investment capital on a penthouse and a Lamborghini for himself. "I'll give you an answer by dessert," I said. "Dessert?" Julian looked incredulous. "Sarah, I need to know now. Then the answer is no. The table went silent. No. Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. You're refusing to help your brother? I'm declining to invest in another of Julian's ventures, yes. This is different. It's always different, Dad. And it always ends the same way. Julian stood up, his chair scraping loudly. You know what? Forget it. Keep your money. I'll find other investors. People who actually believe in me. Good, I said. Do that. Sarah. Mom looked horrified. How can you be so cruel? I pulled out my phone and opened a file I'd been compiling for 3 years. Let me show you something. I pulled up the spreadsheet on the restaurant's TV screen. I'd arranged this with the manager earlier. Column after column of dates, amounts, and purposes. This is every dollar I've given Julian over the past 7 years. $8,435,000 total. Here are the promised returns. $0. Here are the actual repayments. $0. Those were investments, Julian said quickly. Not loans. Really? Because I have emails from Dad calling them temporary loans. I have texts from Mom promising I'd be paid back with interest. I have voice messages from Julian swearing on his life that this time would be different. I switched screens. Here's what Julian spent the money on. The Lamborghini, $340,000. The penthouse, $2.1 million down payment. The yacht, $1.8 million. The watches, the clothes, the trips to Monaco and Dubai, another $600,000. The actual business expenses? About $400,000. Less than 5% of what I gave him. Uncle Richard's mouth had fallen open. Aunt Patricia was staring at the screen in disbelief. Sarah, how did you? Dad was sputtering. I hired forensic accountants. I tracked every dollar. I documented everything. I switched to another screen. Here's Julian's actual business record. 7 ventures. 7 failures. $8.4 million lost. 0 successful exits. 0 returns. Those businesses failed because of market conditions. Julian shouted. No, I said calmly. They failed because you spent the investment capital on yourself instead of the business. Because you hired your friends instead of qualified people. Because you treated every venture like a personal ATM. I pulled up another document. And here's the most interesting part. 6 months ago, Julian filed for bankruptcy. Chapter 7. Claimed he had no assets. The room went very quiet. But that's interesting, I continued, because I have photos of him in St. Bart's 3 weeks ago on a yacht. Not a rental. A yacht he owns titled under a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Julian's face had gone pale. How do you can't? I can. I did. I've spent the last 3 years documenting everything. Every lie. Every hidden asset. Every fraudulent claim. Dad found his voice. Sarah, what are you saying? I'm saying that Julian has been committing fraud. Wire fraud specifically. He's been soliciting investments. My investments. Under false pretenses. Hiding assets during bankruptcy proceedings. Using shell companies to conceal wealth. Mom's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. You're accusing your own brother of crimes? I'm not accusing. I'm stating facts. The door to the private dining room opened. 2 men and a woman walked in, followed by the restaurant manager looking extremely uncomfortable. The men wore dark suits. The woman carried a leather portfolio. Julian Patterson? The first man said, holding up a badge. I'm Special Agent David Morrison, FBI. This is Special Agent Chin and Financial Crimes Prosecutor Janet Williams. We have a warrant for your arrest. Julian tried to run. Uncle Richard was sitting between him and the door. He didn't move. Julian sat back down slowly. Agent Morrison continued. You're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, bankruptcy fraud, and international financial crimes. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights echoed through the dining room while my family sat frozen. Mom started crying. Dad stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Sarah, he whispered. What have you done? I protected myself, I said. Finally. Agent Chin approached me. Ms. Patterson, we'll need you to come to the field office tomorrow to sign your formal statement. Of course. I'll be there at 9. Janet Williams, the prosecutor, addressed the table. For everyone else here, we'll be investigating the extent of your knowledge regarding Mr. Patterson's activities. If you've received funds or gifts that originated from Ms. Patterson's investments, we'll need documentation. Aunt Patricia looked at her watch, a Cartier that Julian had given her last Christmas. Oh God. Anyone who cooperates fully will be treated more favorably, Williams continued. Anyone who obstructs will face their own charges. They led Julian out in handcuffs. He didn't look at me. Didn't say anything. Just walked out between the two agents like a man in a dream. The dining room was silent except for Mom's quiet sobbing. How could you? Dad finally said. He's your brother. He's a criminal, I replied. And you enabled him. We're your parents. You're people who used me. For 7 years, you manipulated me, guilted me and extracted millions from me to fund Julian's lifestyle. Not his businesses. His lifestyle. He needed our support. He needed accountability. Consequences. Reality. I stood up and collected my bag. Instead you gave him money. My money. And told him he was brilliant while he burned through it. Where are we supposed to get the legal fees? Mom asked through her tears. Julian's going to need lawyers. Good ones. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Are you seriously asking me to pay for his defense? Sarah, he's your brother. Mom, I'm the victim. I'm the one who filed the complaint. I'm the one who's testifying against him. Dad stood up, his face red. You ungrateful. We gave you everything. We raised you. You raised me to be useful, I interrupted. To be the responsible one. The reliable one. The one who always said yes. Well, I'm done saying yes. I walked to the door and paused. Oh, and Dad? About that house in the Hamptons. His face went white. The one Julian bought last year for $4.5 million? The one you said he bought with his own money from a successful investment? I have the wire transfer records. My money bought that house. It's titled under another shell company, but it's traceable. Sarah, please. The FBI is seizing it tomorrow. Along with the yacht, the cars, the watches, and every other asset Julian bought with money he fraudulently obtained from me. But where will we go? Mom asked. We've been living there. I don't know, Mom. Maybe get jobs. Jobs? Sarah, I'm 63 years old. Then downsize. Rent an apartment. Live within your means. You know, all the things you told me to do while I was funding your mansion. Uncle Richard cleared his throat. Sarah, some of us didn't know. I didn't know the extent. If you received gifts from Julian in the last 7 years, document them and report them to the prosecutor. Cooperate fully. Maybe you'll avoid charges. I left Le Bernardin and walked out into the New York evening. My phone was ringing before I reached the corner. I sent it all to voicemail. The next morning, I sat in a conference room at the FBI field office, reviewing documents with Janet Williams. This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've seen, she said. You have everything. Bank records, emails, text messages, photos, shell company documentation. How long did this take? 3 years of active investigation. But I started keeping records 7 years ago after the first loan. Something felt wrong even then. Your family is claiming they didn't know the extent of his fraud. My parents knew. They saw the lifestyle. They lived in the house I bought. They knew he was bankrupt but still spending millions. They just didn't care where the money came from as long as it kept flowing. We'll build that case. What about you? How are you holding up? I thought about it. I'm fine. Better than fine. For the first time in 7 years, I feel free. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Please call. We need to talk about this. Julian made mistakes, but he doesn't deserve prison. I deleted it. Another text from Mom. How can you destroy your own family like this? What kind of person have you become? I typed back. The kind who refuses to be a victim anymore. Then I blocked her number. Janet reviewed another document. Your financial records show significant assets. Switzerland, Singapore, Cayman Islands. You've been preparing for this. I've been protecting myself. Every dollar Julian took, I made 2 more. I diversified. I built legitimate wealth through legitimate means. And I made sure it was all untouchable. Smart. Your brother's attorneys are going to argue that you gave him gifts, not loans. That you can't claim fraud on voluntary gifts. I have written agreements for 60% of the transfers. For the others, I have emails and texts where he explicitly promised repayment. And I have evidence he was hiding assets while soliciting more money. That's fraud by any definition. The bankruptcy fraud alone will put him away for 5 to 7 years. Add in the wire fraud, money laundering, and international components. He's looking at 15 to 20. Good, I said. Janet studied me. Most victims struggle with turning in family members. Most victims haven't spent 7 years being gaslit and manipulated. Most victims haven't watched their family celebrate a criminal while treating the victim like an ATM. Fair point. The trial took 8 months. Julian's attorneys tried everything. Family dysfunction defenses, claims of gift-giving, attacks on my character. None of it worked. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Julian got 18 years. My parents declared bankruptcy 6 months later. The Hamptons house was seized and sold. The proceeds went to my restitution. I was awarded $8.4 million plus interest and legal fees. Total, $11.7 million. I'd never see most of it. Julian had spent it. But the judgment was symbolic. Validation that I'd been wronged. That I wasn't crazy or selfish or cruel. That I was a victim who fought back. 2 years later, I sat in my office. Real estate development now, building affordable housing in emerging markets. Profitable and meaningful. Everything Julian's ventures weren't. My assistant buzzed. Ms. Patterson, someone named Uncle Richard is here without an appointment. I hesitated, then, send him in. Uncle Richard looked older. Tired. He sat across from me and folded his hands. I came to apologize, he said. I should have seen it. Should have questioned it. Should have protected you instead of celebrating Julian. Why didn't you? Because it was easier not to. Because your father was so proud of Julian, and questioning that meant questioning everything. Because I'm a coward. I nodded. Honesty was rare in my family. I returned everything, he continued. The watch Julian gave me. The golf club membership. Everything. Gave it all to the FBI. Cooperated fully. Janet Williams said I probably saved myself from prosecution. Probably. She's still deciding. But I wanted you to know. I know what you did was right. It was brave. And I'm sorry I didn't have your back. Thank you, I said. Are you okay? I'm better than okay. I'm free. He nodded and stood to leave. At the door he paused. Your parents ask about you. They don't understand why you won't see them. Do you understand? Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, I do. After he left, I pulled up my investment portfolio. $47 million had grown to $83 million. Smart investments, hard work, and no one draining me dry. My phone showed a news alert. Former tech entrepreneur Julian Patterson begins serving 18-year sentence for fraud scheme. I felt nothing. No triumph. No sadness. Just nothing. He'd made his choices. I'd made mine. And for the first time in my adult life, I was living for myself. Not funding someone else's dream. Not playing ATM for my family. Not setting myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. Just living. Building. Growing. Free. My assistant buzzed again. Miss Patterson, your 2 p.m. is here. The housing development investors from Singapore. Perfect. Send them in. I closed the news article and opened my presentation. Julian's story was over. Mine was just beginning.